Bloody fucking hell. Shit! Oh, there we go. I don't want them hearing motherfucking H bomber guy shit. Motherfucking fuck up. Anyway. I also mean individuals inclined and skilled enough to find effective means to communicate their excitement and thereby build such a movement. The left has always existed in tension between two basic dimensions. On the one hand, the left needs and desires to be concrete and practical, to have its feet on the ground with direct responses to people's immediate needs and solutions for today's problems. On the other hand, it needs to have and project its utopian dimensions. Those include its visions for what could solve not only today's problems, but rather the underlying structural conditions that keep regenerating them. Utopian dimensions also include a clear vision of an alternative set of structural conditions that people believe might work and are therefore worth fighting for as an alternative to deteriorating status quo. Capitalism has generated its own organic intellectuals. In the United States and elsewhere, academic departments of economics have worked to train them at both undergraduate and graduate levels. Undergraduate courses focus chiefly on capitalism's extraordinary excellence in allocating scarce resources among competing demands and generating income distributions that justly reward all contributors to production. Graduate economic programs elevate such utopian claims into formalized models that claim to show how and why capitalism yields a general optimally efficient equilibrium that maximizes the welfare of all market participants. The organic intellectuals of the worker self-directed enterprise movement can present both practical possibilities and utopian visions of a socialism that is far more democratic than the standard examples from the 20th century. By doing so, they may be able to persuade the Occupy movement and the millions it has engaged that worker self-directed enterprises belong on the agenda for social change. The program for increased worker self-directed enterprises needs to support and build in universities, labor unions, social movements, and beyond, the meetings, discussions, courses, and centers that can generate and train organic intellectuals. A new independent political party. As worker self-directed enterprises grow and proliferate, they will acquire and develop organic intellectuals who produce and elaborate their criticism of capitalism and their programs for social alternatives. Given contemporary capitalism's difficulties, support will likely broaden and deepen a struggle for basic social change that includes worker self-directed enterprises as a major component. The conditions will thus emerge for a political party to advocate such change and contest for the governmental power to accomplish it. No existing major party shows the slightest inclination to go in such a direction. Small left parties may do so, singly or in groups, or perhaps a new independent party will need to be developed. In either case, modern electoral arenas, notwithstanding their structural obstacles to basic social change, are simply another place where social criticism and advocacy for worker self-directed enterprises should be articulated. Political parties can achieve legislative gains for the social expansion of worker self-directed enterprises. Elections and representative legislatures are not the only or necessarily the central locations for struggles over social change, but leaving them to the enemies of the movement for worker self-directed enterprises is tactically unnecessary and strategically unwise. Conclusion. The word cure in this book subtitle deserves a qualifying comment. It does not mean some state of completion, some end to problems, contradictions, and further change. On the contrary, it means moving from one set of problems that have become increasingly unbearable to a new and different set that we prefer. Worker self-directed enterprises and on economic system founded on them will no doubt have contradictions and tensions. The people caught up in them will struggle over them, much as people have struggled in and over capitalism's contradictions. However, the struggles over worker self-directed enterprises will differ from those over capitalist or other exploitative organizations of production because they will no longer involve the tensions and conflicts between those people who produce and those who appropriate the surpluses. Similarly, because a system of worker self-directed enterprises will likely have much less inequality of income among participants in the work of enterprises, that inequality too will figure far less prominently in its struggles. To consider a historical parallel, the cure of emancipation for slavery did not mean that ex-slaves put economic or other problems behind them. They no longer struggled over the problem associated with being the property of other persons. Instead, they engaged with new problems. In the United States, that meant entering into a capitalist system and confronting new forms of racist violence and economic exploitation and exclusion. Struggles in and over capitalism replaced the old struggles in and over slavery. Yet a clear global consensus counts the transition from slave to capitalist systems as a major monument to progress, one that should be extended and made irreversible. Recognizing the limits and contradictions of transitions from one economic or social system to another can usefully accompany passionate commitment to such transitions. Those who earlier saw the needs and reasons to move beyond private capitalism to various sorts of state capitalism included many who prematurely declared that the socialism of their dreams and the forms of state capitalism that actually emerged were the same. But there were always those who saw the contradictions and limits of state capitalism and questioned their equation with socialism. The histories of private and state capitalism over the last century and the accumulated dilemmas of both now offer us strong reasons and evidence to believe that we must and we can do better. Examining the limits of both kinds of capitalism returns us to their shared commitment to an internal organization of production based on exploitation, inequality, and hierarchy. That organization's persistence played a major role in preventing state capitalism from evolving into the genuine alternative to capitalism so many had hoped for, and paved the way for reversion to the less regulated neoliberal capitalism that now provokes intense social conflicts across the globe. The transition of enterprises from their capitalist internal organizations to the genuine alternative of workers' self-directed enterprises emerges as a new program out of the history of capitalisms over the last century. The elaboration and clarification of workers' self-directed enterprises in theory are one part of a way forward now. Another part is the concrete practical establishment and expansion of workers' self-directed enterprises. Together, the theory and practice of worker self-directed enterprises compose a powerful and attractive program that belongs on serious agendas for social change today. The end. Hail Satan up in this bitch. What's going on, horror fandom? What's going on, Death Eternal in this motherfucker? In case you ain't know, this is the book I was reading. You like, I can't see that fucking shit. The lighting is terrible, Dave. I know. But it says Democracy at Work, A Cure for Capitalism, and it is by Richard Wolff. This is the second time I've read it. Moving right along. Now I'm reading this book. You like, I can't see that one either. Well, it says 30 arguments against the existence of God, heaven, hell, Satan, and divine design by Jonathan Pierce with the foreword by Dan Barker. I've already started reading it, so you'll have to excuse me, but we're on chapter 10, The Accidents of Geography and History. Counter-apologist and philosopher of religion, John Loftus, wrote an excellent book called The Outsider Test for Faith. The argument in this chapter will borrow from that book to some degree. It's a great book, like all of his other works, and one I suggest you read. As I've already hinted, there are many variables that are involved in why people believe in God, most of which are not particularly rational. The accidents of geography and history are prominent ones. The simple fact of the matter is that there is tremendous religious diversity in the world, but that diversity is ghettoized, isolated or segregated by place or group. The distribution of religion is not random. This is how John Loftus sees it. People who are located in distinct geographical areas around the globe overwhelmingly adopt and justify a wide diversity of mutually exclusive religious faiths due to their particular upbringing and shared cultural heritage. This is the religious diversity thesis. And it is a well-established fact in today's world. The problem of religious diversity cries out for a reasonable explanation, something that faith has not provided so far. The size of these groups is also diverse. We have 2.1 billion Christians and 1.5 billion Muslims, compared to 23 million Sikhs and 4 million Shintoists, and everyone in between in every smaller religions. We have a further problem in that a given religion will itself be split into different denominations. For instance, Christianity has some 42,000 different denominations, largely based on geographical and historical distribution, and often having a variety of competing or conflicting beliefs. Why is this a problem? As an example, if you were an Arab born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 1996, you are incredibly unlikely to be a Hindu. Indeed, it is almost certain that you will grow up being a Muslim. Likewise, you are unlikely to have primal indigenous beliefs of the power of the Amazon River growing up in a Lutheran community in Bible Belt, USA. Parents, families, communities, and societies so often define who we become and what we believe. There are, and this is an indisputable fact, distinct geographical concentrations of religions around the world. Christians may be concentrated in Europe, South and North America, and other pockets of colonial history. Islam prevails in the Middle East, North Africa, parts of subcontinental India, and the islands of the Indian Ocean. Shintoists primarily exist in Japan, and Hindus in India. These and other statistical generalizations and trends exist. If God were perfectly loving, then it would ensure that all people could participate in a relationship with God unless people had somehow deliberately excluded themselves through some kind of resistance. Some philosophers call the people who, under other circumstances, would have happily believed in the right God given the right context, non-resistant non-believers. They don't believe in the right God, not because they are wholly against the idea of that God necessarily, but because they just weren't lucky enough to be in the right geographical and/or historical context. The challenge for religionists is that most religions have it wrong. That is, religions are mutually exclusive. If I am a Muslim, I believe that the Muslim religion and revelation are correct. And I believe my religion is a more accurate representation of reality than that which a Jainist believes in India. And if access to heaven or hell, or nirvana, or whatever afterlife there is, or if access to God, or if access to the fruits of belief in the correct God depends upon believing in the correct God, then there's a lot on the line. However, given the serious implications of belief, it seems rather bizarre that Omni-God would design, create, and arrange the world in such a way that most people don't rationally survey the smorgasbord of religious offerings and then, using logic and reason, assent to the correct one. Instead, they are overwhelmingly born into any given religion. The belonging to a particular religion depends on where and when they were born. And that might well be the component of their existence that informs the verdict of whether or not they access the good stuff or get condemned to the bad stuff, perhaps for eternity. It must be remembered that I am generalizing here for simplicity and that the range of religions have a range of beliefs concerning afterlife and divine reward and punishment. As Loftus continues, the main problem religious diversity presents us with is that not every religious faith can be true. In fact, given the number of mutually exclusive religious faiths in the world, it is highly unlikely that the one you inherited in your respective culture is false, given the odds alone. Robin McKim tells us that it is clear, therefore, that large numbers of people have held and now hold false beliefs in the area of religion. At most, one of them can be true. And since so many people hold false beliefs in the area of religion, it would seem, therefore, that all groups need to consider the possibility that their beliefs in this area may be mistaken. It gets worse when you consider the vagaries of history. Vagaries, my fault. Imagine being born into Egyptian or Aboriginal Australian culture in 5000 BCE, before the events of the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible. Now, imagine that Christianity is the one true religion. How is it fair? When one has no control over when and where one is born, that one is born into one of those contexts. The person would have absolutely no chance of being able to access the correct divine revelation upon which rests the reward of heaven or the punishment of hell. This presents arguably three options for the theist. Number one, even though people end up believing the wrong religion, largely outside of their control, they can still access the good stuff. Number two, God rearranges the world such that the soul of a person who is not able to access the correct God is already known by God to be a soul that would freely reject it. So God front loads that soul into someone who would have no access to this correct God anyway, throwing out the trash before the movie begins, so to speak. And number three, God really did give secret individual revelations to those people born in the wrong times and places, so it's all okay, really. These options are evidently a trifle problematic. For option one, the corollary of this defense is that we don't really need to believe in the right religion in order to get to heaven or similar. In the context of Christianity, this might mean that I don't need to have faith in Jesus in order to get to heaven. I can be an Aboriginal Australian or a Muslim or an atheist and still get into Christian heaven, presumably because I am a good human being. In other words, it's about the deeds, the works, and not faith in Jesus and the other aspects of the Christian God. I think an awful lot of Christians would have a problem with this. Most religions seem to operate on a platform of believe our religious doctrine, the correct one, or you're in trouble. Rather than, it really doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're a good person. Of course, for people like myself, the latter option is far more appealing. It's about having a world full of good people. The second option above, as espoused by, for example, Christian apologists like William Lane Craig, is, I think, fairly egregious. We will actually return to it fairly soon when considering heaven and hell. But in the meantime, it looks something like this, as set out by theist Tim Stratton. God knew that those who never hear the gospel would freely choose to reject it, even if they heard it. Remember that God has perfect omniscience. Therefore, he knows with certainty who would freely accept his offer of love and who would freely choose to reject him, even if they could do otherwise. Since God knows who would freely choose to reject him, even though they really could do otherwise, why does God even need to let them hear the gospel since he knows they would reject it anyway? I can imagine this unevangelized person face to face with Jesus on Judgment Day. This person might initially object and say, but this isn't fair. How could I have rejected you when I didn't even know about you? God would reply, well, I knew that even if you were face to face with me on earth, that you would have rejected me anyway. The defendant would then reply, well, that's right. I would have rejected you then, and I reject you now. God can make sure that those who would repent, if they hear the gospel message, will hear the gospel message. And as an advocate of God's middle knowledge, I believe that God knows with perfect certainty who would repent after hearing about Jesus. Therefore, if hearing the gospel is necessary to be saved, God can make sure that those he knows would accept him and will be born in a time and place in which they will hear the gospel. So, if God, with ultimate control and knowledge, knew that an entity it created would indubitably reject it, then in creating that entity, God is creating a human so that they can go to hell. Isn't that something? I don't think either of these three options gets the theist out of a bind. They're not good enough and look rather like desperate and ad hoc rationalizations. I would offer a fourth option to the ones listed above: universalism. Universalism is the idea that everyone is eventually saved one way or another. If I were to be religious, this would definitely be the option I would take. I can make no sense of God at all, but if there were a God, this God and religion would be universalist. If I were God, everyone would eventually get the good stuff. After all, it would be my fault for knowingly designing and creating them in the wrong contexts anyway. But with most versions of God as we understand them, and given religious exclusivity, the scenario presented in this argument is as follows. Number one, our beliefs will define whether we get the good stuff or don't, heaven and hell, loving union with God, etc. 2, our beliefs are overwhelmingly defined by when and where we are born. Number 3, numbers from 1 and 2, whether we get the good stuff or not, is overwhelmingly defined by when and where we were to be born. Number 4, we have no control over when and where we are to be born. Number 5, most people are born into the quote unquote wrong places where beliefs prevail that preclude them from getting the good stuff. Number 6, from 3 through 5, most people overwhelmingly have no control over whether they get the good stuff or not. Number 7, a creator who knowingly designs and creates a world in which human beings are punished for something they have no control over is an unjust creator. Number 8, God, being ultimately powerful and responsible, has control over everything. When and where we are to be born, the entire world into which we are to be born, who is to be rewarded and punished, and how, etc. Number 9, God designs and creates a world in which it knowingly allows most people to overwhelmingly have no control over the good stuff or not. Number 10, God knowingly designs and creates a world in which most people are punished and overwhelmingly have no control over their punishment. And number 11, from 7 through 10, therefore, God is unjust. One example out of many as to how omni-God cannot be fair or just, and by not being fair or just, is not omnibenevolent. Thus, if God exists, God is not an omni-God. Chapter 11, Unfair Levels of Evidence. We often hear that God wouldn't put a cross on the moon as overwhelming evidence for his existence because it's just too overwhelming and doesn't give people the choice to believe. But this is thoroughly problematic. This is just another argument to show that God is not fair. And as you have seen, by not being fair, God does not exist as an omni-God. We don't need to imagine scenarios like putting a cross on the moon for proof of the existence of God. Instead, we can refer back to the Bible itself or to any holy book that gives preferential access to God for one or other protagonist, Moses, Muhammad, Muhammad's entourage, etc. For this argument, I'm going to refer back to doubting Thomas, one of Jesus's very own apostles and disciples. God saw fit to convince doubting Thomas, who, after all, knew Jesus and saw him do his miracles. He was a disciple, not just any disciple, but one of Jesus's inner circle. And yet, even he didn't initially believe in the resurrection, attested to by his friends and eyewitnesses, until he had Jesus standing in front of him and until Jesus made him touch the wounds. As John 20 relays, chapter 24, but Thomas, one of the 12, who was called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples were saying to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Well, unless I see in his hands the imprint of the nails and put my finger in the place of the nails and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." 8 days later, his disciples were again inside and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the doors having been shut, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Place your finger here and see my hands, and take your hand and put it into my side, and do not continue in disbelief, but be a believer." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, have you now believed? Blessed are they who did not see and yet believed." And yet, almost the entirety of the rest of humanity is not remotely afforded this level of evidence and is expected to believe, arguably on pain of hell. Thomas got to poke Jesus, bodily resurrected in front of him, in the hands. He got to feel the skin of the real and resurrected God, and only then did he believe. He's now a saint. This is completely unfair and involves terrible double standards. God is not fair. Therefore, God is not perfect or omnibenevolent. The only way God could deal with this potential unfairness is by having some kind of metric for judgment that allows for everyone's causal circumstance to be taken into account. Person X believed in God 69%, but only with a 32% evidential basis. But what of person Y, who believed 90% on evidential basis, 12%? And how about person Z, who believed on 15% but only had 2% evidential basis, and all combinations thereof? I'm not sure that this form of metric is either evidenced in the Bible or elsewhere, and I do not know if the classical versions of God could use this metric because it would know the outcomes in advance anyway and would not need to create the test in order to verify its infallibility, predictive knowledge. I will leave aside the dubious historical accuracy of this pericope. I bet that's pronounced paricipe, but anyway. It tells us, though, that the great St. Thomas only ended up believing in Jesus' resurrection when presented with firsthand sensory experience of it. Evidently, the apparent eyewitness testimony of his fellow disciples wasn't enough. Yet, for an awful lot of, perhaps almost all, modern potential and actual Christians, and all people throughout time, from Amazonian tribes people to someone born in Mecca in the 1600s, there is a completely unfair distribution of evidence. Thomas is afforded far more evidence so that he eventually believes and becomes a saint, no less, than I can ever reasonably expect. If the end result of judgment and heaven or hell is based on my belief, decision without the same experience as Thomas, then this seems even more unfair. And unfortunately, those secluded Amazonians do not even have a Christian option in their decision. I or you don't remotely get to cross or even approach that evidentiary threshold or benchmark. All we get is a bunch of people telling us a particular book is the one true book amongst a whole collection of holy books and revelations from other people and cultures and religions around the world, and that's it. I can be no more truly convinced about Christianity by accounts of personal revelation than I can about Islam and Hinduism. Since Christians, Muslims, and Hindus alike purport to receive mutually incompatible revelations and equally swear by them, an outsider like me cannot take personal revelations claims as reliable reflections of truth. And explicitly philosophical arguments can only really get you to generalized atheism, deism, or theism. The Bible is what gets you to Christianity. Yet the Bible is very poor evidence indeed. We have unknown authors writing in unknown times and unknown places with unknown sources, unverified and unverifiable, writing with evangelizing agendas ex post facto with no historiographical pedigree. It's shockingly poor evidence. And I can supposedly go to hell based on whether I choose to believe that very low-level biblical evidence. Yet St. Thomas, the apostle, gets to stroll through the pearly gates, one assumes, on the back of not believing, assuming the Gospels are true here, even though he is presented with a level of, say, 85%. And Jesus then reversing this unbelief in the resurrection, Jesus' divinity and the whole atonement idea, not that Thomas actually would have understood this at the time, I wager, by getting Thomas to poke him and raising the evidential threshold to 95%. Note, I'm making these figures up to illustrate my point. The Christian believer could counter that different people react differently to differing levels of confidence, or evidence rather, and concoct some kind of counter-apologetic. My general point would be, yes, all sorts of people will react differently to the same level of evidence, and all sorts of people get different levels of evidence. It's all a bit of an unfair mess. Time for another analogy. Imagine I have a class of 30 children to whom I give a test. All 30 children have different brains, knowledge bases, abilities and thresholds, etc. I give them a test of 100 questions and declare that the children who fail to get at least 70 of them correct will get detention. Children who get 70 will get a special treat. I then give them a test. Except I also give out different cheat sheets to everyone ranging from 0 points of help to 95 points of help. Each child either gets no extra help or gets some kind of leg up to getting closer to that 70% to that 70-point success. Some people, like little Thomas, gets a cheat sheet with answers wrong, with answers worth 95 points. Lucky him. Poor Alice, who is not very clever due to her genetics and troublesome environment, gets a cheat sheet with 0 points of help and gets 16 out of 100, and she gets detention. We could actually make this more accurate. Some children are given stricter cheat sheets or trickster's cheat sheets, like our Saudi student, Mo, who gets a sheet that actually tells him wrong answers and leaves him with 35 points less than he would have gotten on his own. He gets 50 and receives detention. Perhaps as a teacher, I actually take in the answers, but don't announce to anyone the results until the end of the school day. In the meantime, I plug their results into a matrix that calculates an outcome based on 1, abilities, 2, environment, 3, cheat sheets, and 4, their results. I then use these calculated results to enforce on them a detention or a reward. That would need some unpicking and looks rather like some kind of deterministic algorithm, the results of which, as this particular teacher, i.e. God, I knew in advance anyway. In other words, creating the test is pointless. What the algorithm would actually produce is everyone getting the same marks, since the algorithm would have to be fair. There would be no child who would have their environment, genetics, cheat sheet, or anything else over which they have no control given them an advantage or disadvantage. The only fair option for an omni-God designing and creating all humanity from nothing is to give everyone the same chance at heaven or hell. And when we control for, causal circumstances, this translates to the same score. Finally, let me bring into play one particular apologist, Catholic Dave Armstrong, who took umbrage with my claims about this, but didn't really hit the mark, as you'll see. Here's a snapshot of my blogging world. He said, I think God does provide sufficient evidence of all sorts for every human being, but human beings have various mechanisms by which they rationalize such things away or reject them. If it's not efficient enough to bring about belief, I'm not a Calvinist and believe in human free choices and free will, then one can either criticize God or point out that perhaps the person involved has an irrational demand. The fault can conceivably be on either side. God's not to blame for everything, as many of his critics seem to think. This is actually contradictory. Sufficient does not entail a range. Sufficient means enough for a particular purpose. If I need to put oil in my car for the engine to run, then I put in, say, 1 liter, then Centeris Paribus, this is sufficient. Of course, if my car has a hole in a pump somewhere, then this is not sufficient. To get to the next town, I need to put in 2 liters to overcome the leak. 2 liters are the sufficient required amount. 1 liter is not sufficient. It should be sufficient if we made inaccurate assumptions about my car by comparing it to another car of the same make and model, but without the leak. All other things remaining equal, but all other things are not equal. They almost never are. So a sufficient amount of oil will change from car to car as well as the type of oil. Likewise, sufficient evidence and type of evidence for belief will change from person to person, no matter what the belief you're talking about. What Armstrong is erroneously saying here is that 10 units of evidence that the moon landings never happened is sufficient evidence for Lenny to believe in the conspiracy theory. Therefore, 10 units of evidence is also sufficient evidence for Julie. But Julie is a scientist and a skeptic whose uncle worked on the NASA team. 10 units simply isn't sufficient for her. This is skeptical thinking 101. Armstrong's contradiction is obvious. I think God does provide sufficient evidence of all sorts for every human being, but human beings have various mechanisms by which they rationalize such things away or reject them. This should really be translated as, I think God does provide sufficient evidence for every human being, but all humans are different, meaning that the evidence isn't actually sufficient. I don't really know what that is. Or A doesn't equal A? I think that's what he's saying. Yeah. So it really should be, I think God does provide evidence for every human being, but all humans are different, meaning that the evidence isn't actually sufficient. Which he almost begrudgingly accepts and then says of the entity who knowingly created and designed everything in existence, in the full knowledge it would do what it would do because it designed it that way. The fault can conceivably be on either side. God's not to blame for everything, as many of his critics seem to think. I utterly contest that claim. God literally designed and created everything in the full knowledge of what would come about. God knew even eventually, and why it would be, and brought it about anyway. Of course, God is ultimately to blame. Doubting Thomas is another example of how easy some have had getting through these pearly gates and how difficult it is for others, and how unfair omni-God really is. Fairness is a theme that is running throughout these arguments. It doesn't matter which way you slice and dice it. It's just a fact that certain subgroups of humanity are more likely to believe in God than others. This can be something of a problem. This is the case with men compared to women, and with certain autistic people compared to neurotypical people. There are other subgroups still, but I'll concentrate on these two categories for the sake of brevity. To start with, I present a fascinating paper, Mentalizing Deficits, Constrained Belief in a Personal God by Ara Norenzayan, Will M. Gervais, and Kali H. Trzynowski. The basic conclusion to be made from this work is that people on the autistic spectrum, think particularly Asperger's syndrome, have, due to their cognitive functioning, a much higher disposition not to believe in a personal God. This is largely due, it appears, to a lack of empathy. Empathy, and more particularly intersubjectivity, seems to underscore our belief in and our beliefs about a personal God. This can be seen in believers needing to put themselves, quote unquote, in God's shoes, so to speak. The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is very important. In other words, in all your words and deeds as a believer, what would God think of you? This intersubjectivity of placing yourself out of your body and imagining you from another point of view is something that particular groups of autistic people struggle with. And this, it seems, is why they have less propensity to believe. Of course, they didn't choose to be this way, as the paper states. Religious believers intuitively conceptualize deities as internal agents with mental states who anticipate and respond to human beliefs, desires, and concerns. It follows that mentalizing deficits associated with the autistic spectrum, and also commonly found in men more than in women, may undermine this intuitive support and reduce belief in a personal God. Interestingly, the paper concludes that there are even more variables at play that can affect belief. Finally, the prevalence and content of supernatural agent beliefs, although constrained by core social cognitive capacities, respond to and fluctuate with socio-demographic conditions across time and cultures. Within this broader theoretical landscape, these studies present new evidence for a social cognitive mechanism underlying one source of individual differences in religious belief. There is a similar pattern with men as opposed to women being less prone to believing in a personal deity. This fits with other research that shows that women are more empathetic and that women are more likely to attend church. Here is an interesting extract from an article discussing this idea, as well as concerning people with autism. Men, on average, score worse on the ability to sense emotion, but better on prime numbers, a talent that demands no insight into anyone else's feelings, than do women. And university professors do worse again, while scientists come at the bottom of the list. People with autism score even lower. Those severely affected live almost detached from the world around them. They lack empathy, concentrate on themselves, and may be obsessed with a particular talent, such as being able to tell what day of the week and any date will be, combined with loss of other mental abilities. Children with a milder version of the condition, Asperger's syndrome, are often clumsy, shy, and tongue-tied. Others do much better, for they have high-functioning autism. Such individuals are successful, but have little insight into the emotions of others, and often show a deep interest in things mechanical and numerical. The personality type is much more frequent among males than females, and at least in its most severe forms, has a strong genetic component. On the emotion sensing tests, those with autism do worse than Asperger's patients, followed by the high-functioning group, and then in order by scientists, professors, and men. Women come out on top. People with autism are mainly interested in the banal reality of what surrounds them and find it harder to consider the abstract world. They are, as a result, highly resistant to the idea of an invisible deity for whom no tangible evidence exists and whose thoughts cannot be penetrated. Teenagers with the condition are far less likely to express a belief in God than their unaffected classmates. The high-functioning group are also much more willing to class themselves as atheists than are their fellows, and in decreasing order of skepticism, people with autism, Asperger's patients, scientists, professors, men and women in other studies, men are only half as likely to be believers as their partners. Perhaps a logical, systematic, and self-centered personality is disposed to doubt, while a more responsive mind is more willing to summon up the divine. Believers are in emotional contact with their deity. They feel that he responds to their prayers, knows their thoughts, and guides his subjects in their proper paths. They empathize with their angel and accept what they imagine to be his instructions. Those with autism, scientists, and men are happier with their own thoughts. I want to tread somewhat carefully here, as autism is a large umbrella term that encompasses a massive range of people. There will be many exceptions to the claims here, and there are many types of autism that will not fall into the great net categories or conclusions as those shown above. I say this as a father of an autistic child, but the general point holds. Certain types of people are less likely to believe in a personal God than other types of people. As Live Science reports, looking at research into higher religiosity among women, a new analysis of survey finds women pray more than men and more likely to believe in God and are more religious than men in a variety of other ways. The reasons, analysts say, could range from traditional mothering duties to the tendency of men to take risks, in this case, the chance that they may not go to heaven. The latest findings, released Friday, are no surprise, only confirming what other studies have found for decades. Still, the new numbers illustrate interesting and stark differences. They come from a fresh review of data that was collected in a 2007 survey and initially released last year by the Pew Research Center. The percent of women and then men who are affiliated with a religion, 86 to 79. Have absolutely certain belief in a God or a universal spirit, 77 women to 65 men. Who pray at least once a day, 66% women, 49% men. Have absolutely certain belief in a personal God, 58% women, 45 men. The survey involved interviews with more than 35,000 U.S. adults by the Pew Forum on Religious and Public Life. As mentioned, it is not important why this is the case, only that it is the case. Some reasons are presented in these sources, but I don't need to consider them for the purposes of this argument. Remember, Omni-God had all the possible worlds it could have created that it conceptually designed as hypotheticals and chose to create this world. In this world, or rather like the geographical and historical argument seen previously, certain people have more chance of believing in God than other people, irrespective of the communities in which they grew up. If God's intention for us, if our objective is to enter into a loving union with God, and if heaven and hell are on the line for us if we do not, then it is grossly unfair that the dice are stacked in the favor of some and against others. God, again, has ultimate design responsibility, and this is yet another design fault. It can be formulated into a syllogism. God is omnibenevolent and will have fairness as a benevolent attribute. God wants humans to enter into a loving relationship with it. God has designed people, or the system that designs people, to not have equal fairness and opportunity to access a loving relationship with him. God also has the power to level the playing field ex post facto, but appears not to do so. God is not fair, and thus not omnibenevolent. God is not omnibenevolent, or God does not exist. And that is the end of parts 1 and 2. Now we would venture on to part 3. But I'm going to stop right there just because I'm tired of reading. I don't fucking know, dog. I could turn the camera around so y'all can like see a player. But you want to see me for, dog? You know what I look like, son? No, I'll turn it around. It's only 80 y'all on here anyway. Hold on, let me see if I can. Ha! This lighting is terrible, but that's why I had it the other way, because yikes. It's like the sunlight is hitting the mirror, which is bouncing the sunlight right into my motherfucking face. You know what I'm saying? Satanist, atheistic, of course. I was gonna make a video, another one, addressing a lot of the Christians that be commenting on my page and shit. This is fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious, bro. Like, these motherfuckers, dog, like, they really be thinking this shit mean anything to me, son. Like, they be like, you look, why you got the pentagram on your hoodie and shit? Why your shirt says Satanist and all this other shit? And I'm like, you know why? because I know it bothers you, motherfucker. Like, that's why I do it. These symbols don't mean shit to me, son. I'm an atheist. I don't believe this shit. But I know you motherfuckers can't help yourselves. See, I see this shit and just be like, oh my God, this motherfucker here. I pray for you. And I'm like, bullshit, fuck out of here. But that's why I do it. Like, plus, I mean, I like the aesthetic. You know what I'm saying? I like the aesthetic of the all black, you know what I'm saying? And all that shit, you know what I'm saying? The devil this and all that blasphemous type shit. That shit just looks dope. You know what I'm saying? On top of, it's just trolling Christians, and I fucking love it. I fucking love it. Anyway, I'm probably gonna make a video about it in a minute. Just to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll probably pick somebody's comment out and make a video responding to it. I just don't know which one yet. You know what I'm saying? There's just so many to choose from. Oh my God, these Christians be in their feelings. I love it, though. I love it. I'm gonna get off here because this lighting is terrible and it's like fucking with me and shit. Plus, I want to make me some coffee. You the man, bro. Daniel in this bitch. What up, Daniel? Fuck yeah, son. I appreciate the hearts. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, dog. Nah, you the man. You know what I mean? Motherfucker be tripping, dog. I love it. I fucking love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, it's sad because, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have had to do a lot of, well, let me change that. I've had to apply a lot of skepticism to my own beliefs. And I've been doing this for a while now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I used to believe that God was real and Jesus and heaven and hell and all that. Like, I used to believe all that shit. You know what I'm saying? I used to be afraid to say blasphemous shit. Like, oh, he gonna strike me down or some shit. You know what I'm saying? I used to believe all that shit for like years. You know what I'm saying? I went from being like an actual practicing Christian. Like, when I was younger, I had like thrown away all my comic books because they was all violent. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like X-Men and DC and Image. Like, we was hard on Image comics. You know what I'm saying? Back in the 90s. Like, we was hard on Image, Spawn, and all that shit. You know what I'm saying? But I knew that if I was to show these to God, you know what I'm saying? Like, would God approve of Spawn comics, like the imagery and the violence and the debauchery? And I was just like, nah, man, he wouldn't like that. I don't think he'd like any of the violence in any of these comic books. So I threw them all away. I used to collect comic books. I threw them all away because I was like, God wouldn't approve of these. You know what I'm saying? And I tried to be good. Like, I stopped cussing and shit. And I used to get shitted on by like Christians in school. Like, what you mean you don't cuss? I'm like, what the fuck? Well, that's when I didn't say what the fuck, but I'm just like, that wouldn't be like, I represent God, you know what I'm saying? And I can't be one of God's soldiers out here just all cussing and carrying on. You know what I'm saying? I got to be presenting myself, you know what I'm saying, as though I am a follower of Christ or whatever. Like, I used to get shitted on for that by other. I was a Jehovah's Witness, you know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, other Christians used to give me shit, but I'm like, and that just further made me believe with more conviction that Jehovah's Witness Christianity was the correct one. Because I was like, why is all these other like Protestant Christians and whatnot giving me so much shit for doing what they should be doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all out here just wilding, talking about you people of God. I'm the only one trying. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not sagging my pants. I'm not using cuss words or vulgar language. I decided to just start reading the Bible on my own, like all kinds of shit. This is in like middle school, like 7th, 8th grade, some shit like that. And I say probably probably before 9th grade started, I stopped. Like, I just stopped going to the Kingdom Hall, AKA church for non-Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, I stopped going because I felt like the lifestyle I was living as a teenager would bring shame to God. And I didn't want to go around talking about, oh, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, you know what I'm saying? I'm a representative of God. And yet I'm out here doing this and that, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, so I didn't want to bring shame to God. So I just stopped practicing Christianity. You know what I'm saying? Like I stopped doing the work. I just became more what people would call a cultural Christian, where it's like you just sort of accept that there's a heaven and a hell, and that there is a God and a devil, and you just try to do good. You know what I mean? But you don't like really go to church. You pray probably a lot, but you don't really go to church like that. You know what I'm saying? Like I became like that kind of guy. And then I just started like doing more research and shit. And then I was just like, man, hold on, dog. There ain't no motherfucking God. Like, it didn't seem like there was. I'm like, not from everything I learned. Like, well, hold on, dog. Like, I understand there's suffering in the world, but there was just too many motherfucking questions. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like looking further. And the more I read the Bible, the more I became disgusted by it. Like, I started doing research on the Bible, and I'm like, man, hold the fuck on. You know what I'm saying? Like, how come I never came across these scriptures? Like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? Like, how come I never seen Leviticus 25:44? How come I never seen fucking Exodus 20? You know what I'm saying? Or none of this shit. Like, Galatians 22 or some shit. I forget the verse. I'm just like, bruh, man, what the fuck is with all this endorsement of slavery and shit? Like, what the fuck? Like, man, hell nah, dog. And there wasn't no ambiguity about it. It was like Exodus 20, I think it's Exodus 20 or Exodus 21. Like, man, there ain't no ambiguity about it. Ain't no about, oh, that was an indentured servant. Not that makes it any better, but it was like, that ain't what he described. He was like, hell nah, you can pass them on you can bequeath your servants to your children as it is your property. They're your money. It's like, man, what the fuck? That's not an indentured servant. That is property. That is a slave, son. But anyway, when I think that shit, I'm like, oh, hell nah. No wonder Christians use the Bible to defend slavery throughout all those years in America. Because they had all kind of verses they could point to showing that God approves of this. It's just the way God wanted it. You know, we enslaved the heathen from the nations around us. We didn't enslave Americans. We went to the heathenist countries and took those heathens and made them do our work. Yeah. So once I seen all that shit, plus other shit, you know what I'm saying? It was just like, women ain't shit, basically. Like, you are either your father's property or your husband's property. Like, what the fuck you mean you single? You an independent woman. No, the fuck you not, bitch. And you better not be out here with your head uncovered either. That's in the Bible too. Like shit, I thought that was just some Islam shit. No. That's also in Christianity. Now I see why Islam and Christianity have so much in common. But anyway, like, yeah, dog, I'm like, well, what the fuck is that about? But how come ain't no rules for us like that? You know what I'm saying? Or like, if you rape a chick, all you got to do is pay her father some money or whatever, and then like marry the bitch. I'm just like, what the fuck type of shit is this? Like, what the fuck? Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you got to read all them rules. Like, I was like, oh, hell nah, dog. Moses tripping. No, I don't know if he wrote all those. I think he did. Hold on, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Yeah, Moses wrote that shit. Man, Moses is tripping, dog. But hey, God gave him the word, right? See, that's why I don't believe none of this shit. None of it. Because there's no evidence for any of this shit. You know what I'm saying? It's just some bullshit stories that contradict each other, that have no basis for any kind of decent morality. Fuck you mean? Morality, according to the Bible, is just whatever God say do. That's being moral, just whatever God says. So if he says stone your unruly children to death, then that's what you must do. You know what I'm saying? If he says enslave the heathen around you for the nations around, I guess that's what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what he said. He don't want you lying, a man to lie with another man like he would with a woman without being stoned to death. You know what I'm saying? Like, and don't be a child and antagonize a bald man. He'll sick bears on your motherfucking ass and maul you to death because pro-life or whatever. Fuck out of here. Your God is not pro-life. I don't even know why Christians pretend to be pro-life. How you gonna be pro-life and you support the death penalty? Fuck you mean? You know what I mean? You can't be one or the other, motherfucker. You either support the death penalty or you're pro-life. You pro-life motherfuckers are just basically pro-birth, motherfucker. Like, you just pro-birth because you don't give a fuck to support any sort of like what you would call handouts or measures that would go out to helping disadvantaged people, poor people, women, single mothers, all that type of shit. You don't want none of your tax money going to support them kinds of shits, because God forbid, right, that she just not be born into wealth and might struggle a little bit. You know what I mean? You don't want to support that shit. So it's basically fuck that baby. And what if the mother has to go on welfare or has to get women, WIC benefits, or what if she needs to get food stamps? But you don't want to give her that either. You're like, oh, fucking entitled motherfucker. It's like, oh, all that. But I thought you was pro-life. So you're not really about pro-life. You're just about pro-birth with your dumb ass. So that's why I'm like, man, pro-life motherfuckers are so full of shit. It's like, how you just pro-birth because you don't want to support any policies that go towards helping poor people, especially if those poor people don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? Or identify with the same sex that you identify with, gender, I should say, that you identify with. Like, you don't want to help that. You don't want your tax dollars going to go fund nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? But you also don't want the bitch to be able to abort the motherfucker. Yet you also don't do anything to support any charity drive, food bank. You don't do nothing to help the poor at all. You know what I'm saying? But yet you pro-life. No, the fuck you not. You know what I'm saying? Get the fuck out of here. You pro-birth, and that's all the fuck it is to it. And the only reason why you that is because your fucking dumbass Christian dogma. It's like, oh, life starts at conception. No, that's just what you wanted to say, when actually, statistically speaking, most women who get abortions are right-wing Christian bitches. Like, look it up. Think I'm bullshitting. The people who get abortions the most in this country are Christians. You know what I'm saying? Why y'all talking about, my ass, motherfucker. Like, you Christian bitches out there getting more abortions than a motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? But you don't want... And then anti-abortion legislation don't even stop abortions, dumbass. All they do is make it harder to get one. Not harder for bitches with money, though. Not harder for wealthy hoes who would just drive to the state that made it legal. You know what I'm saying? There's no problem for them. It's all you poor bitches who's getting pregnant that's going to suffer. Because now you're going to have to go do some probably back alley shit, some hanger type shit. Fuck yourself up, potentially. You know what I'm saying? So you're not stopping shit. You're just making it more barbaric. And you're just making it more of a difficulty for poor people, for poor women, poor single mothers specifically. Because you don't give a fuck about them either. Especially if don't get me started. Anyways, I'm just saying, I could go all day with this shit. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm like, I don't like capitalism. I don't like neoliberal capitalism. It's all fuck shit. It's all about the money. It's all about individuals and atomization and motherfuck your neighbor and all that shit. Fuck capitalism. That's why I'm a staunch advocate of socialism, i.e. communism. And if you don't know the difference, socialism is essentially summed up in one sentence. The workers own the means of production. That's it. That's it. You go to Walmart, you go to Amazon to go to work. Instead of Jeff Bezos and the shareholders owning the computers and the robots and all the other things within the facility that you have to use to do your job, instead of them owning it, you would own it. Everyone who works there would collectively own that company and all the means of production. And you would collectively decide democratically what you would produce, when you would produce it, where you would source the materials from, how to divide up the shares and the spoils, probably in a much more equitable fashion that is being done now. That's all socialism is. It's not about you can't have shit. It's not about everybody getting the same pay for the same. It's not about that. Dumbass. Look it up if you don't know what the fuck socialism is. But that's basically it in a nutshell. And the way I believe Karl Marx, and it may not have been Marx, it could have been someone else. I can't remember because I read like some Marx, some Lenin's. I'm not sure if it was Lenin or Marx that said this, but basically that, or it could have been Engels actually. It could have been Friedrich Engels that said this. But basically, a communist society is one in which everything has been socialized. So as long as there is any single industry left within the society that is exploitative, then we're not a communist society. It's still just a socialist one until there is no exploitation. Once that happens, now we have a communist society. I dream about days like that. Like we're just just this capitalistic neoliberal ideology has done nothing but pull us apart as people. It has made us almost in a way lose our sense of community and brotherhood and fellowship, because it's all about, I got to get mine. I got to come up. It's all about me and mine. You know what I mean? You better get yours. It's a dog eat dog world and all that bullshit. I'm going to come up. You know what I'm saying? I came up, son. You slipping and all that bullshit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, when the fuck? That was actually one point that Bertrand Russell was saying that, like, or no, I don't think it was Bertrand Russell. I think it was just some shit I seen on YouTube where they were saying that the evangelical Christians of today don't actually represent Christianity. They were like, Christianity is supposed to be about helping the disadvantaged, helping the poor, welcoming them with open arms. If you're hungry, I'll feed you. You know, if you need shelter, and if I'm able to provide it, I'll just give you the shelter. You know, if you're cold, I'll come in and get warm. If you're hot, come in and get some air conditioning and maybe some water. You know, it's like that's what being. If that's what Christianity was, I would have no problem with Christianity at all. Like, if all you're doing is charity and helping the communities, food drives, and, like giving out turkeys and shit at Thanksgiving time and coats in the winter and just socks to the homeless. If you were just doing shit like that and promoting that kind of behavior, that'd be cool. But since it's got to be all this fucking, gays are going to hell, so fuck the gays. And, what the fuck is that about? Like, why I gotta be that shit? What is this? Observe the Sabbath. Fuck the Sabbath. You know what I'm saying? What you mean I can't covet shit? I mean, we wouldn't have a fucking functioning economy if we didn't covet. That's the whole point of what we do. And the GDP, it's all about coveting. I want that so bad. I gotta buy it now. Like, this is a consumer economy. You know what I'm saying? Fuck you, me. Of course we're coveting. Covetousness is what we do best. Fuck out of here. And don't worship any other idols. Bullshit. You know what, motherfuckers, I feel like worship nowadays? I know you about to be like money or some shit like that. And I used to would have said that. But now I feel like motherfuckers worship themselves. Which, in a way, I advocate for, to be honest. I mean, just be honest, but that's what you're doing, I mean, all this TikTok and this shit, all these social media channels, you know what I'm saying? Like, my channel is basically, I'm just trying to get motherfucking word out, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get the word out one way or another about class consciousness. I'm just trying to get people aware of their positions in life, that in this exploitative neoliberal capitalist society, you need to know your position. Like, and it's not about, are you a Democrat or a Republican? It's not about that. It's not about, are you voting for Biden or are you voting for Trump? It's not about that. It's not about, are you gay or cis, or it's not about any of that shit. They just want, meaning the establishment, just want all of our attention focused on that nonsense, on that bullshit, just to further divide us, just to further fucking divide us. So we're not paying any attention. First of all, if we can't come together, there's strength in numbers. So the more that they can get us to wrench us apart from each other, you know what I'm saying, then we won't have that strength in our collective, you know what I'm saying, as a collective force. We won't have that because we're too busy arguing each other over, you believe in God and you're an atheist, or you're on the left when you're on the right, and you voted for Obama, you voted for me. It's like all this nonsense, dog. Like, who gives a shit, son? All that really matters is, do you own the means of production or don't you? Because if you do, then you will probably actually love the way capitalism's been working for the last 40, 50, 60 years. But if you don't own the means of production, which is probably you watching this, then it's in your best interest to understand that you're not going to be able to defeat these people with the power, who own the means of production, who have all the money, therefore have all the influence. You're not going to be able to defeat them because you don't have the money. Therefore, you don't have the power or influence. All you have, you're just a single unit. You know what I'm saying? And that single unit can't do shit. That's why you need everybody else. You need all the rest of us who don't own the means of production, the rest of us who have to go to work and take orders and wear uniforms or whatever the fuck, you know what I'm saying? Like, all the rest of us, regardless of who you vote for, regardless if you're Democrat or Republican, fuck that. We all go to work at the same place, Democrats and Republicans and everything else in between. We all go to work at the same motherfucking places. We all have to exist amongst, you know what I'm saying? We all have to do that. We all have to commingle and all that shit. We got to work together. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't make any sense to continue to divide ourselves by fixating on those dumbass, meaningless labels, because the only label that matters is bourgeoisie and proletarian. And you are not the bourgeoisie, you are the proletarian. Because you have to go to work for a living. You have to get exploited in order to make a living. You can't just let your money make money, you know what I'm saying? Like, nah, son, you got to worry about how you going to pay the bills, how you going to pay rent, how you going to give such and such money for whatever field trip they're about to embark upon. Like, you got to worry about shit, financial shit. How am I going to do this? Oh my God, my check engine light's on. My tire's blown. Like, you got those kind of problems. Rich people don't have them kind of problems. And they want to keep it that way. They want to make sure you stay poor, always living in precarity or just at the cusp of, while never, ever actually being able to realize the freedoms afforded to you in the Constitution. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You can't do any of that shit. What life? Your life is exploitation, motherfucker. What liberty? You got the liberty of the fucking bosses, motherfucker. Pursuit of happiness. No, you're just in the pursuit of contentment. You're in the pursuit of making lemonade all the time because that's the only thing you're afforded to make. You are only handed out lemons, so you have to constantly keep making lemonades. Maybe your lemonade's a little better than it was last year, but nonetheless, it's still lemonade. Meanwhile, the bourgeoisie rather, are drinking grape juice and apple juice and sparkling water and wine and liquor and all kinds of shit. They have options. You don't. You just drinking lemonade because that's the hand you dealt. You know what I'm saying? You don't get to fully embrace this life and all of the richness of living in this world, especially in this society. You don't even get to enjoy it. Not like they do. They get to just travel around and buy fucking islands and jet set here and there and just and chill. Meanwhile, you have to go to work. And you only get one life just like they only get one life. So why does your one life have to be at the mercy of the capitalists? They're not at no one else's mercy. Or are they? Because where do they get their profits? They get their profits from the work that we put out there. So if we stop doing the work, then you won't get any profits. And you're definitely not going to bring your shareholders down to fucking Walmart and stock shelves. Fuck out of here. You ain't doing that. So you're gonna be like, oh my God, what do these peasants want? Like, we want this, we want that. We want paid time off, paid vacation. We want a living wage, like, you know, because they're not gonna do the work. If you stop doing the work and everyone else there stops doing the work, who's gonna do the work? They're gonna be constantly losing money until someone does the work. And they're not going to fly from their mansions out to the local Walmart that y'all all decided to stop working at to start running shelves and, you know what I'm saying? And we got a meat and produce truck to put up in the back, cap 2 to the fucking back room and shit. You know what I'm saying? They ain't about to do that shit, son. They ain't about to do that. They need your monkey ass to show the fuck up and come do this bullshit work for the little crumbs they paying you. But what if you all decided, no, we're not doing that? Can you imagine, like, every Walmart, just for example, every Walmart in the United States on, let's say let's just pick a day, March 5th. We just decide March 5th, every employee who is not the store owner or even management, because management probably be on that bullshit too. So fuck management. But everyone who's not management, like if you just a fucking shift leader and below, what if all y'all decided not to go to work March 5th? Just nope. And then everyone's like, You know that shit will make the news. They're like, what? Not one Walmart in America, or at least most of them, was like, there's nobody here and shit. You know what I'm saying? They got like 3 motherfuckers trying to operate the whole goddamn store. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there might be somebody in the subway or whatever, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, what would they do? That shit would make the news. They'd be like, what the fuck's going on? And it's like, workers want they motherfucking dues. You know what I'm saying? Like, we want our motherfucking vacation. We want parental time off. And we want more of the profits. We want more of the cut of the profits that we produce. That's what we want. That's all. You know. Or we can even go further. Like, nah, we want to own the means of production. Bitch. That's what we want. You know what I'm saying? But it would have to be a collective effort. Like, they're not going to do that shit because one store said so. They'll be like, well, fuck that store. Just shut it down. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it has to be all, what are they going to do? Shut down all the Walmarts? Fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Especially if you do like key Walmarts, like find out which ones make the most money every year and then just like kind of target those Walmarts. Not the low budget Walmarts, not the Walmart that's like that one butt fuck small ass Walmart in the middle of nowhere. Not that one. I'm talking about like all the ones in like say like New York, DC or some shit, like big boy Walmarts bringing in big boy money, like significantly more than all the other Walmarts. Let those ones shut down. Like, cause all the employees, all the cap 1, cap 2, you know, so all the motherfuckers like, I ain't going. All on the same day, no matter what shift, first, second, whatever. Like, nope, ain't nobody coming to work. We just, nope. And then what they gonna do? What could they do the next day? What they gonna do? Fire all of you? Yeah, right. They ain't gonna be able to fill all them positions overnight. Like, they ain't gonna be able to do that. All that training and paperwork and all that. Yeah, right, bro. They wouldn't be able to do that shit. Hell nah. They can't replace the whole workforce in one day. Like, nah, son. So that's why I'm like, yeah, man, just can you imagine? Even if it wasn't like every Walmart everywhere, what if it was just one Walmart in one city and state, you know what I'm saying, that did that shit? Like, everybody was just like, fuck it. We're not coming to work tomorrow. You know what I mean? That would be fucking dope. Because there's nothing they could do. Like, it would make the news. It'd be like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? They'll probably try to get in touch with like a Walmart CEO or some shit. Be like, what the fuck's going on? You know? And it's like, what are you gonna do? Fire everybody when they come back the next day? They ain't gonna do this shit. You know what I'm saying? So let me fucking do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? For you, you know. Worse for you, I guess, you just lose a day's pay. But can you imagine how much you've been losing because they won't pay you what you're due? I'm just saying, it's far more than that money you'll be giving up by not coming to work that one day. I'm just saying. Anyway, man, I'm gonna get the fuck off here. I want to finish reading these books. Well, I already finished this one for the second time. Last time I finished it was February 27th, 2023. Oh, what's today's date? Saturday, January 20th. So I finished again. What I say it was? What's today's date? Oh, January 20th. I thought I said February 20th. I'm tripping. 1/20/24. Saturday. Then back to this one. 30 arguments against the existence of God, heaven, hell, Satan, and divine design by Jonathan McPherson, right? I totally fucked that up. Jonathan Pierce? What is the MS in the middle? Jonathan Ms. Pierce? I don't know. Forward by Dan Barker. Are you satanic? Nah, son. I just like the aesthetic. I said this earlier in this live, but yeah, dog, I don't believe in Satan. I don't believe in the devil. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the hell, heaven, angels. I don't believe in any of that. Mostly because there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence at all to suggest any of that shit. Ain't no motherfucking ghosts. Ain't no motherfucking goblins. Ain't no motherfucking Santa. Ain't no motherfucking Satan. There's none of that shit. I'm not none of that shit. I just wear this shit because I know it fucks with Christians. I am literally a walking troll of Christianity. That is literally what my like. If I put a video up about Christians, I'm just trolling y'all. You know what I'm saying? Unless I'm just holding you to what your Bible says. You know what I'm saying? Like, cause I'll have those videos where I'm like, excuse me. Because those are people who are actively violating whatever some scripture says, and I'll just correct them on it. Like, excuse me, you're being a hypocrite. You are not following the word of Jesus by what you're doing right now, sir, ma'am. You know, so like I'll do that. But the other shit, like all my Matt Dillahunty videos, I mean, I post those because he makes good points. You know what I'm saying? And if a motherfucker were honest, they would just take him for the word. Like, what is he saying? Like, what question is he asking? If he asks you, how do you know this? And you come up with some bullshit, fallacious reasoning, we're going to call you out on it. Like, that's not a good reason. That's not even a reason, really. You know, so, and honestly, every argument I've ever heard for the existence of God has been a fallacious one. And it usually contains more than one logical fallacy when people are trying to defend the existence of their God. So yeah, I like to think of myself as a skeptical person who's rational. I'm not saying there is no God. I'm just saying I don't see any evidence for one at all, or at least none of the ones that have been proposed ever. So that being said, that's, you know, I'm a skeptic. I'm open to the idea that there may be a God. It's just I don't see any evidence for it. And yeah, I'm an advocate of skepticism and critical thinking and reasoning, and, you know, and education. Like, I mean, I be making lives, reading books and shit. You know what I'm saying? Because knowledge. You know what I mean? Not to mention to strengthen my arguments. Dang, what you got against Christians? It's nothing necessarily. First of all, I don't have anything against Christians. Not necessarily. I just have a problem with Christianity in the United States. Not even necessarily just in general, just in the United States. Because the Christian right has been successful at legislating their belief system onto the rest of us. And by that, I mean, all of these bills that are one could classify as anti-trans bills or anti-LGBTQ bills all stem from a place of religiosity where they feel as though it's some sort of sin and therefore should not be allowed. Same thing as abortion. And it's like, what the fuck, people? You know what I mean? Like that, and it's only because you think your holy book is telling you that this is the correct thing to do, to legislate other people's lives in a society that was not anti-Christian, but it's a secular society. So that's the only problem I have with Christianity in the United States. I don't have anything against Christians, not just because they're Christians. Like, that doesn't bother me. I don't give a shit. You know, it's just when they start to try to like infringe upon my rights or someone else's rights because they feel that they have been given the okay by God or biblical edict in order to do so. And it's like, I'm not cool with that. And the reason why I only pick on Christianity and not some other religion, like y'all keep liking to point out, is because other religions don't have a monopoly of power in the United States. Now, if I lived in Pakistan or some shit or whatever religion, you know, whatever country Islam is the majority religion in, then I would be most railing against Islam because that would be the dominant religion making all of the decisions in that culture. Why would I rail against Christianity when they don't have any power in a country that's Muslim dominated? But in a country that's Christian dominated, Christians are the ones, you know, with all the authority, with all the wealth and the power and the preference, as opposed to like other religions. So that's the dominant power holder, you know, of all religions in the United States. So that's why I rail against that one the most. Now, if it were different, like if some other religion in America, like if the Satanists, for instance, if the Satanic Temple had all the power in America and people were voting based on what they thought the Satanic Temple wanted, I'd have a problem with that. Because I'm like, excuse me, secular society, don't be pushing your satanic shit on me, you know. Just like, excuse me, secular society, don't push your Christian bullshit onto me. Practice that shit at home or at your church or with other like-minded people, but keep that shit out of politics. Fuck out of here. Ain't none of you motherfuckers holier than thou. Ain't none of yous. So calm the fuck down. Half y'all be just as guilty of your own fucking edicts than the rest of us heathens, so to speak. Anyway, man, this lighting is like really fucking me up. So I'm gonna just end this right now. If you want to know more about my position or whatever, just look at the rest of my videos and shit. You know what I'm saying? I'll be addressing this shit. You know what I mean? I've never had anything against Christians. I might have I just don't have anything against the people. It's the system that they support or that they represent that I have a problem with. All right, y'all. And as always, hail Satan.